All right, man. So the good news is you're not crazy. No one reasonable actually thinks that Kamala Harris did a good job on her interview. I thought it was a flop. I'm sure that you thought it was a flop, but I recognize that A, I'm pretty biased, and B, the entirety of the left they're all gaslit, propagandized, crazy people. Honestly, I thought that they would love this interview, and some of them do, but some are actually honest about it, and they don't. And a few of the reactions on the internet, man, are just too damn funny to not share.
Well, my friends, Kamala's first interview was an utter calamity. It was also incredibly boring. I would have rather gotten a colonoscopy, but I do it for you guys. I'm a martyr. I do it for you. Now, let me start off by saying the bar is so low, it's in the 7th ring of hell. I wasn't expecting much from Kamala Harris, but I was expecting a little bit better. She's had 40 days to prepare. Kamala Harris answered those questions like she'd just been pulled over by highway patrol and was asked to take a breathalyzer and walk in a straight line. Like, ma'am, could you step out of the car? And she's like, my values haven't changed because they're my values. I'm gonna start calling Kamala Anna Nicole Harris. The way she was talking, it was like, I've been very clear. I love fracking. I've been clear since 2020 that I stand by fracking, Dana. Kamala Harris had 40 days to prepare and she did not give one clear, cogent, substantive answer the entire time. One thing I found incredibly ridiculous is asking Kamala Harris what she wants to do on day one. What do you want to do when you get into office? She's been vice president for almost 4 years. I also felt like Dana, whatever, was leading the witness. She was like, Kamala, did you do this because of A, B, or C? This is not the SAT multiple choice section. She's running for president of the United States. Ask her a question and let her answer. Now, Kamala Harris, she's supposed to have the best people around her with all these years of political experience, but let me tell you one mistake they made. Their biggest mistake is that they waited 40 days to do a sit-down interview. Had she been doing regular interviews, the stakes wouldn't have been that high. It wouldn't have been such a big deal. She would have developed a rapport and a cadence with all of these journalists, but instead, we're all watching now with a fine-tooth comb. Now let's talk about Mr. Jazz Hands Tim Walz. He was there next to Kamala Harris the entire time, but he did not do much better. When he was asked if he lied about IVF or his military record, he said, well, my wife says I don't have the best grammar sometimes. Sir, telling bold-faced lies and then saying, well, I could have had better grammar is the most ridiculous cop-out thing I've ever heard. You clowns had 40 days to prepare, and this is the best product you could come up with. Now, my most important question about the entire interview is this. Why are you guys sitting around a dark, dingy diner slumped over tables? Why don't you look presidential at all? Why are you not sitting down doing an official interview? Kamala, you're hunched over like this, waiting for a shot and a chaser. This whole thing was a calamity. If y'all were gonna do your first interview in a diner, you should have gone to the Waffle House. That place is lit up like the Chrysler Building. I'm starting to think Joe Biden extended his vacation this week because he didn't want to be around at all to answer questions about Kamala's horrific interview. I mean, they really have her hunched over this table in a dark diner. She says she doesn't support the Green New Deal, but they were really saving some electricity having all the lights off. Something else that's laughable from the entire interview is that Kamala Harris wants to blame Donald Trump for all of America's issues. But if you look at the last 16 years, 12 of those years have had Democratic presidents. She really sat there and said, well, 10 years ago this started, and 10 years ago that started. Sweetheart, Barack Obama was president 10 years ago. Get the girl a calculator.
I gotta be honest, man, that is pretty damn funny. The internet is full of really, really funny people, man. And the guy's right. He's not just funny. He's right. 40 days to prepare, and it was just a flop. Nothing substantive, nothing important, nothing. And you'd think after a month, over a month, they would have at least had some good canned scripted answers that she could just impress people with, right? But the best they could do were some lies about her history on certain positions. She said that her values haven't changed, even though everything she believes in has. Still don't even know what the hell that even means. And then Tim Walz, when they talked to Tim Walz, he chalked up all of his lies to what his wife calls bad grammar. And this again, man, this is what they came up with in 40 freaking days.
So that is the reality of it.
Former President Trump not impressed. He posted that Harris, quote, rambled incoherently and, quote, America will become a wasteland if she's elected. His running mate earlier this morning.
If you have the same values, why have you changed your mind on literally every topic that you previously held an opinion on? She's just trying to pretend that she's not far left now because, of course, she wants to win the American people's votes. It's really absurd for Kamala Harris to sit there and say, well, I don't actually believe in any of the thing that I told you I believed 3 years ago. She has governed as a person who believes those things, and unfortunately, the American people are far off because of it.
Fox News contributor Joe Concha says the long-awaited formal interview can be summed up in just 2 words: dishonest and train wreckalicious, which he admits may not be an actual word, but he calls it appropriate. Longtime Obama advisor David Axelrod's take: meh.
I think on the whole, this was a good night. It wasn't a huge, I don't think she moved the ball that much forward, but she certainly didn't fall back.
Well said by Vance, man. I mean, it is obvious why the American left just hates J.D. Vance. I mean, the guy, he's absolutely right. You cannot change or hide every single thing you believe in and then just claim that your values haven't changed. It makes no sense. It doesn't even mean anything. Only completely insane people believe her, except for, of course, David Axelrod. He's allegedly sane. Him and the network that are actually responsible for the disaster apparently believe her. I mean, literally only the Vote Blue no matter who crew are at all impressed by Kamala Harris. No one serious is impressed. And here's the thing, man. Even the pollsters are not impressed. And nothing impresses a pollster in the year 2024 more than a non-white woman who isn't Donald Trump. And I gotta say, man, if Frank Luntz is not impressed, then you might be in some real trouble.
But I was not impressed as an observer and someone who was expecting more from her with this much time to get prepared. And so I would have graded her a C in her first appearance. She's going to have to do better in the debate.
That might be the understatement of the year by Frank Luntz. You got to do better in the debate. That's absolutely right. She's got to do better in the debate. But how? I mean, if you can't even nail a softball friendly interview, if you can't hit that out of the park with 40 days of preparation, how could you possibly ever expect that person to do any better or even passable in a debate? It makes no sense. I don't think that it's possible. And it's not just me and Frank Luntz that actually think that. I mean, the propagandists on her very own network, they're not impressed either. You know, even Abby Phillips on CNN, she could pretend right here, but I cannot imagine that she's actually impressed. You saw a little snippet on the Fox clip I showed, but listen to the mental gymnastics these people have got to engage in to cope with what they saw happen to their very own people.
I have also spent a couple of times now interviewing her. What did you make of how she handled it? I mean, to David's point, a little bit more comfortable now than she has been in the past.
Yeah, I think there's been a consistent story of growth. She's been in more of these settings. I think we saw that somewhat tonight. I also think to the question about how policy positions have changed, they were clearly ready with an answer about how the values have been consistent. For me, and one of the lines that stuck out was, "This is a new. I think people are ready for a new way forward." She said that a couple times. It goes to David's point. I don't think there's a policy separation that they've created with Biden. Obviously, she gave a kind of personal defense of him, but they're also very clearly trying to position her as a change candidate in the same way that Donald Trump is positioning himself as a change candidate. In some ways, it feels as if that's going to be the crux of what this comes down to in November, is whether that is bought by the electorate or not.
And interestingly, there is some polling to suggest that it's a battle right now. It's actually a live ball.
It seems that that's where this might live and die, but I think it's really interesting because for someone who doesn't want to talk about race and gender, who doesn't want to kind of put that identity forward, it is allowing her to make the case of change without kind of saying those words. And so I thought that was really in the air of this speech. But to the point about normal versus weird, the future versus past dichotomy that they're trying to create, I think they landed that tonight. I think they want to present them as a package that is relatable to people and that is someone you feel familiar, whose story is familiar, whose message is familiar and relatable. And I think that's something that she's grown in, and we saw that this evening.
Apparently, when you're talking about Kamala, it's best to actually talk like Kamala. Who knew? But apparently, this guy's trying to convince the CNN viewer that the vice president over the last 4 years, who hasn't distinguished herself in any real meaningful way to be any different than Joe Biden, is some sort of change agent, just waiting for her day one, which would actually be day 1,300 and something, right, if you're counting. This guy said absolutely nothing, and he said it about nothing, which is exactly what Kamala Harris did in that interview. Still no substance, still nothing impressive. It's just vibes and feelings. And that's That's not what's going to save the world from Joe Biden. Vibes and feelings are not going to save the world.
Ashley.
So I think I would break this down into 3 parts: values, vision, and her voice. And I think she made it very clear that she is still committed to her values, to be an American, to be a prosecutor, even though she may have changed on some positions. And she clearly outlined where she had changed. I think on the vision, she attempted to draw the contrast without talking about Donald Trump, but still being very clear and not berating her current boss, actually. And when you think about the opposite ticket of J.D. Vance, where Donald Trump's vice president isn't even on the ticket anymore, we don't need to go down why that is the case, but she was clearly able to draw her vision for how she wants to take the country forward with her opportunity economy, and then her voice. I think so many Americans want to know, who is she and does she have command of her voice? And she answered every question. Now, you might not like the way she answered them, but she answered them as a capable, qualified leader. And I do think she moved the ball forward a little bit. You know, maybe she didn't score a touchdown tonight, but she definitely moved down the field.
All right, Scott.
Just listen to what you're actually hearing here. She says people tuned in to see if Kamala had any command of her own voice, and she does. She says you might not actually like her voice or the things that she got to say with it, but you have to actually respect that she said them. That's essentially what they're saying. It makes no sense, but this is what these people expect you to believe. You know, her own propaganda said that she didn't score a touchdown, but she did move the ball. The whole problem with that analogy is she wasn't playing against anybody. Everybody at that table was on her same team. And if you cannot score a touchdown when the defense is working with you, maybe even for you, then you need to give up the ball.
I agree with Ested about this idea of the question of who's going to change will be the fundamental defining question of the election. And I was sort of watching this, you know, holistically. What is she saying? What does she look like? What's on the screen? So at the beginning, when she's talking about Biden and their record, our screen said, this is called the Chiron, the headline at the bottom. It said, Harris stands by Biden administration economic record. She is making it clear that she will embrace and be a continuation of Biden's economic policy, his record, what they've done. She offered no remorse, no regrets, no introspection about anything they've done. She continued to blame inflation on this fantasy price gouging idea. She had no additional thoughts on the economic situation in the country or what they've done beyond just saying, Joe Biden and I have done a great job. Now, if I were the Trump people, I would be salivating over the idea that that's how they are going to run the race. I don't believe it's tenable. I also thought it was interesting that she didn't take any responsibility at the end for telling the American people that Joe Biden was fine and he was strong. I mean, we all know that's not true. That's why he's out of the race, and she's still standing by the idea that he was fine and he's strong and that he's fine today. Nobody believes that, and I just think at some point, then why isn't he running?
Because he's too old, point blank. Same reason why Donald Trump probably shouldn't be running, because he's too old and out of touch.
I think most Americans know the truth.
God bless Scott Jennings, man. I honestly, I do not know how this guy does it, man. I would love to meet Scott Jennings. I mean, anyone that can go to work in a place like that every single day and battle against these kinds of insane people has got to be one hell of a guy, man. I mean, these are not serious people, and they prove it. You know, Scott had a great point. You know, she could have really set the tone, you know, gained some real credibility regarding Joey's mental decline, but she still says that he's strong. And Scott said nobody believes that. And the girl with the bad football analogy says, I do. Jumped in she said it with conviction, man, completely serious. Very happy to let you believe that she believes that Joe Biden is strong. And that's the same Joe Biden that's been asleep at the beach for a month. But like I said, man, God bless Scott Jennings. He's got a pretty good checkmate coming up here in a minute.
And when you're running to be president and you're willing to look them in the face and tell them something they know that you know is not true, it does speak a little bit to your character.
Scott, and curious what you think about this, Axe. Will voters care about that part of it, which is kind of backward looking, or do they care about what's next?
Well, I think the part of what Scott raised that could be problematical if they prosecute it properly is, I think Biden deserves a lot more credit, frankly, for guiding the country through the pandemic and the economic calamity that he walked into than he gets. But inflation over a period of years has been a heavy toll on people here and around the world, but around the world is not relevant here. And so to the degree that they can say, she is going to continue doing exactly what Joe Biden was doing for people who don't have confidence in Biden's policies, that is a prospective problem. I don't think the thing about, this whole thing about, you didn't say it tonight, but you've said before, and I just disagree with this notion that Dan actually asked a question. Well, you've been there for 3.5 years. No vice president makes policy. Okay, let's just make that clear.
Well,
nobody, I said this before. Nobody talks about the Pence years. Okay,
Well,
nobody talks about the Biden years when Obama was. But nobody does that. So, but it is a challenge for her to take credit for the things that are good, and to try and walk away from the things that are not.
But she did make policy, though. I mean, she said, I was the last person in the room on Afghanistan. And she cast many tie-breaking votes in the Senate.
She didn't. That's different than saying that she made the decision.
Yeah.
She claimed to be his last and most principal advisor on Afghanistan. That is not.
She said
that's her words.
She said she was the last person in the room. Which
What
is
does
not
that mean
say
to you?
She created the Afghanistan
It means that
policy.
she told him whatever she thought, and he did whatever he thought he wanted to do.
One of the things that struck me.
Checkmate. I mean, absolutely right, man. Last person in the room making the decision on when and how to surrender American lives and millions of Afghan women to the Taliban. That is policy. That is Kamala's policy. And in her role as vice president or president of the Senate, she did worse than actually make the policy. It was her vote that enacted these policies and literally cost taxpayers trillions and trillions of dollars. Her direct action is responsible for almost all of the excess inflation that we've experienced under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. I mean, she is more responsible than any other vice president in history. And people know, man, this is why she was so unpopular. I mean, Dick Cheney polled better the week after shooting his friend in the face than Kamala Harris ever polled as vice president. I mean, people are not stupid. And that's why it's taken such an amazing show of force from the media to try and make this craziness even have a chance at happening, right? But this is what we get, man. This is who these people are. This is what we're up against, man. It's remarkable stuff, guys. No one that is still doing their own thinking thinks that Kamala Harris gave a good interview. No one thinks she's got any good ideas, and no one reasonable thinks that she's an acceptable candidate. Man, it's all one giant clown show. But that's all I got, guys. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you haven't already, be a part of our growth. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Most importantly, share the channel. I'll see you in the next one.